Well, hello. Today we want to talk about another form of evidence, supposedly for common design, that evolutionists used to use a lot. It's kind of been debunked to the point where hardly any evolutionists, at least in there, that are in the know, actually don't use it very much anymore. But you'll still find this in textbooks, and still find teachers, especially high school teachers, and even some college professors that still refer to this as evidence for evolution, and that's vestigial organs. Now, a vestigial organ is an organ that supposedly had a function at one time in our ancestors, but now it no longer has that function. In fact, it doesn't have a function at all, or it's losing its function. And two or three examples that we commonly see. One is the appendix. You can take your appendix out. And so the question is, well, if you can take it out, does it really have a necessary function? And in our ancestors, like say a rat, I used to dissect rats when I was teaching biology, and we used to always look at this thing right at the end of where the small intestine ends up joining into the large intestine. And it's called the cecum, and that's kind of like where our appendix is. Now, in rats, that big thing is really, really large, and it's actually used to help digest nuts and berries and those kinds of things. Now, we don't have the same kind of diet that, say, a rat does or other rodents. And so a lot of people think that, the reason why our appendix is so small compared to other animals is because it's losing its function. It doesn't really we don't have to, use that to digest stuff anymore. And so it's losing its function, but it had a function in the past. Another one is the tonsils, where, we can take out tonsils, but and we can survive fine. Uh, so, why do we have tonsils if we don't really need them? They don't really have a function. Your coccyx, your tailbone. A lot of people, evolutionists, say that obviously a tailbone was obviously important to our ancestors, our monkeys, and things like that were our ancestors. But now, our coccyx, our tailbone is quite shortened out. And the reason why is because we don't need it anymore. We don't use that anymore. But it's an evidence that at one time it was. And so vestigial organs supposedly are evidence that at one time we needed these organisms in our ancestors, but we don't need them anymore. Now, one of the things that has happened is over a period of time, we found out that some of these organisms we didn't think have a function do have a function. For instance, your appendix and also your tonsils help produce antibodies, and they help produce things that help protect your body from disease. Now, when you take your appendix out, it doesn't mean that you can't fight off disease anymore. It's just that other structures and other organs that do take that actually have to, have a bigger responsibility, and they kind of take over for the organ that's missing. It's kind of like a kidney doubles its size almost. If you have one kidney removed, the other one will almost double in size. The body has a way of kind of protecting itself from a loss of something. And so the appendix is like that. The tonsils are like that. And if you've ever broken or known somebody that's broken their tailbone, the tailbone's pretty important. It provides attachments for certain muscles. And if you don't have those attachments or they're messed up, I mean, you can't hardly sit, you can't hardly walk without a good, solid tailbone. If you mess that up, it's really got to function, and you know it very quickly. Well, this has been something that's been changing over time. Back in the 1870s and 1900s, early 1900s, there were all kinds of things in our bodies that we didn't know, that we thought didn't have a function. And of course, science has kind of progressed over the last 100 years. And so obviously, a lot of things that we didn't think had functions do. I found this little clip that I want to show you from, I think it's Answers in Genesis, or might be Institute for Creation Research. I forget where I found it, but it's a little clip that talks about vestigial organs, and I think it describes it a whole lot better than I can. So let me share that with you. Get that on here, and we will share. And let's make it full screen so you can enjoy it. And back it up.
Today's topic is one of the oldest and classic, longest-running arguments used as compelling evidence for evolution. It's the supposed evolutionary throwbacks called vestigial organs within living things. And the argument states that many living organisms, including man, have primitive or degraded organs that were once functional in our evolutionary past, that now have very reduced function or sometimes completely useless. Now, most importantly, vestigial organs are considered by some evolutionists to be evidence against creation because they reason that a perfect creator would not make useless organs. Now, the word vestige is derived from the Latin word vestigium, which literally means a footprint. The Merriam-Webster's dictionary defines a biological vestige as a bodily part or organ that is small and degenerate or imperfectly developed in comparison to one more fully developed in an earlier stage of the individual, in a past generation, or in closely related forms. Now, Charles Darwin had argued this in his book, The Descent of Man, drawing up a list of a dozen organs, which included wisdom teeth, the appendix, your coccyx, which is your tailbone, and claimed that this was strong evidence that we'd evolved from primitive ancestors. He described these organs as bearing the plain stamp of inutility, uselessness, and said that they are extremely common or even general throughout nature. Now, Darwin speculated that these rudimentary organs once served a function necessary for survival, but over time that function became either diminished or non-existent. And by 1893, the German anatomist Robert Wiedersheim grew that list of useless organs up to 86, and that included the thymus, tonsils, adenoids, valves in your veins, the parathyroid, pineal and pituitary glands. And of course, all of these have been shown to be functional, and some are critical to life itself. So Wiedersheim's vestigial organs were presented as one of the so-called proofs of evolution in the famous Scopes monkey trial of 1925. And Horatio Hackett Newman, a zoologist from the University of Chicago, stated on the witness stand that there are, according to Robert Wiedersheim, no less than 180 vestigial structures in the human body, sufficient to make a man a veritable walking museum of antiquities. For over 100 years, evolutionists have continued to use vestigial organs as evidence for evolution. Even in 1971, the Encyclopedia Britannica claimed that there were more than 100 vestigial organs in man. And even as recently as 1981, some biology textbook authors were claiming as many as 100 vestigial organs in the human body. One of the most popular current biology textbooks declares this: many species of animals have vestigial organs. Examples cited in humans include the appendix, tailbone, and muscles that move the ear. And in addition to textbooks, countless popular science magazines, evolution blogs, and websites continue to promote vestigial organs as evidence for evolution. A website sponsored by the Discovery Channel, for example, assures us that the human body has something akin to its own junk drawer, and that this junk drawer is full of vestigial organs or souvenirs of our evolutionary past. But despite the overwhelming scientific and medical research debunking these vestigial organ claims, as recently as 1997, the Encyclopedia Britannica, despite well-known research to the contrary, still listed the appendix this way: the appendix does not serve any useful purpose as a digestive organ in humans, and it is believed to be gradually disappearing in the human species over evolutionary time. Today, however, doctors would consider that pretty laughable, as the appendix is recognized as a highly specialized organ with a rich blood supply that manufactures several types of antibodies. And one by one, over the years, the list of vestigial organs has shrunk down to a handful of highly questionable examples within the evolutionary community itself. So, is the idea of vestigial organs a compelling evidence for evolution? Absolutely not. Because it's not just the fact that these vestigial organ claims keep getting knocked off the list that makes the claim so weak. It was the fact that the whole concept was a terrible so-called proof of the story of evolution to begin with. Evolution ultimately is about how new structures, forms, functions, and features came to be in the first place, not about the degeneration of existing structures over time. Something that used to have a function and no longer does is no direct help to the story of evolution, but it fits perfectly with the biblical history of an original good world that's degenerated over the last 6,000 years.
He says it better than I can say it. Think about this, like the pituitary gland and the adenoids in your in your body and stuff being vestigial organs. I'm glad nobody took my pituitary gland out when I was younger, because it certainly isn't a vestigial organ. And evolutionists, there are a lot of them that are very few evolutionists use this as an argument anymore because it's so weak. But websites and textbooks and stuff still you will find this used as evidence for evolution. And it's almost laughable now because we just keep knocking things off the list, and it just doesn't fly. And so again, we would say that this is not an evidence for common ancestry, but it's almost evidence that we have a common designer that's designed some wonderful organs that have some really beautiful functions that exist in our life.